Hi, just checking once again. Am I audible to all?
Yeah, you are audible.
Okay, okay, great. Just let me know anytime in between if there are any audio issues or anything. All right. We ultimately on the way give or this aside, and a lot of questions are make it to the college that you want, and those questions are understandable. And we're here to address some of them today, not necessarily strategically, although we can discuss strategy, but psychologically. I think in the last 1 month, we want to discuss psychology more than anything, in the sense that what am I feeling on the day of the exam? Am I going to be able to confident about my prep? Things like that. So, yeah, sure. So, I just want to discuss, I want to share with you my experience was on the final day, and you can expect your final when going. Is the person all okay? Just give me a minute. All right, I think I'll just move into a more like I'll move into a better spot where there's better connectivity. But yeah, our football field.
Oh my God. Are you
Are
in
you
the
guys there?
library?
But yeah, the football field and just behind walking around campus. In the meanwhile, I'll get to a spot with better connectivity. So this was the idea. So yeah, this side is the men's hostel, the mess. What you just saw, walk there. It's late at night and they close the football field late at night. And obviously there'll be some connectivity issues there. So I just want to walk to a part of campus that I can show you, maybe the new academic block, which was recently constructed. The point of this is, I suppose, to give you sort of a motivation dose that look, where this is where you can be in the future. But I'm also going to discuss the paper and your preparation a little bit sooner after this. But just for the time being, I want to see what I can see, okay? Show what I can see. There's a little garage here where people park their vehicles, and from the house residence, you make your way to the new academic block. And on the right side here, there's a volleyball court here, although you can't see it because it's extremely dark.
Can you show the library?
Because I clearly have some connectivity issues because connectivity is not great on campus. It's alternating between my data and campus Wi-Fi. But I hope I'll be able to get into a better spot so my voice is more clear when I'm speaking to you guys about the paper specifically. Yeah, this is the gate through which we enter to the men's hostel. I am on data abuse there, and even that is causing little connectivity issues. So this is the new academic block. Most of our classes are held here. Some of them are in the old academic block. I don't know if you can see it from this angle, but it is quite big. It's newly constructed, so it has great facilities, AC, charging points everywhere. So and this is the pathway just behind the new academic block. Uh, there's a small vendor there who sells coffee, tea, chips, omelette, things like that. Right. So this is a small part of the campus that I can show you for the time being. And there's some small places here where you can just sit with some friends and talk. That's entry into the new academic block, right? So that's a little bit about campus. But obviously, you guys are eager to hear talk about your prep as well. And I encourage you to drop whatever questions that you want to ask in the chat box. Aside from that, I will be dealing with some of the questions that, as a mentor in my classes, I most commonly get at this stage, such as how do you deal with a mock, what happens with a bad mock, what am I going to do on the day of the exam, if they're a dropper, for example. Yeah, I'm sitting at one place. If they're a dropper, for example, how exactly are they going to deal with the same pressure that they dealt with last year? Piyush is asking, well, okay, before that, I'll just finish this little campus sneak peek. Piyush is asking, do you guys use cycles or around to get around campus, or do you walk? You can get cycles, but the issue is everyone comes from a different state, and no one comes here and buys cycles specifically, so everyone just walks. It is pretty time consuming. Like I think the campus is 23 acres, so it's time consuming to walk to one from one place to another. But I think people make do. People mostly walk. And some people have scooters because they're from Bangalore, and if they have scooters at home, they just bring them here. You can even use that to get from one campus to another. It's a very lazy way to do it, but some people do that as well. And hi, can someone just check if the mic is switching? Jaydev, can you just mute yourself? Yeah, thank you. Right. And I'm very free to take any questions on like campus, small things like this also. Uh, and we can address these as well because before you take the exam of your life, you want to know the kinds of things you're getting into, uh, and knowing like these little small details about the place is like being there. And I think that in some sense is motivating, and in some sense is inspiring. And even if it's just out of sheer curiosity, I encourage you to just ask. So if you have anything you'd like to ask about campus, you can, personally just drop it in the chat box. So Abida says, do they allow vehicles on campus? So they don't allow vehicles inside the campus, technically. Although some people do it, it's actually a code violation. Usually people take vehicles from uh, one gate to another. So they take it from gate 3 to gate 1, and you can go from the outside. So it's not technically inside campus, but you're still using it to travel around campus, like to and fro. So vehicles are not allowed. You can park them inside. That's the most that you can do, and the parking is free. So there's that. That's one upside. Vending machines. I'm not sure where you heard that a lot about from, but yeah, we do have a bunch of vending machines. Actually, I think I'm just near one. I don't know if I can go and check it out. Oh yeah, I can. I'll just walk to there and I'll discuss it meanwhile. But yeah, we have about 4 or 5 vending machines on campus, and you can just use your like scan your code. You download an app, scan a code using the phone. You click whatever item you want, and that thing pops out. Just like you see it in the movies. I haven't really seen a lot of vending machines around India before, so this was a new thing to me. But yeah, there are about 4 or 5 vending machines on campus. One in the men's hostel, one in the girls' hostel, one in the old academy block, new academy block. So that is a cool thing. Yeah, if you're into snacking, it's pretty convenient. You saw it in a short on YouTube. Oh right, I'm not sure who that is actually. I've never seen their YouTube content. How are the professors? The professors are fantastic. I think that's the best thing about this place, because the professors are quite dedicated, quite what they do. I think probably the best academicians that exist in that field of law, and they're there to pass on their knowledge and discuss any doubts that you may have. They engage with you on a personal level. So, firstly, I think the professors are one of the best parts of the university. That is, I think, even to date, the biggest perk that NLS has, in my opinion. The quality and the number of professors here that you can consult. We have extremely renowned academicians from almost every field of law, which I think is pretty great. On a side note, I'm here near the vending machine, so I thought I'd just show that to you guys. That vending machine. Uh, you can just scan this code here, download an app, and you can a bunch of stuff, open door take if you want. We have a couple like these around campus. You've heard somewhere that your CGPA at NLS freezes in the third year. Is that true? Well, I'm not entirely familiar with that, but I don't know how that works as of yet because I'm still in my second year. But to my knowledge, I think that's for corporate placement specifically. So your CGPA in your third year is frozen in the sense that they don't consider what the CGPA is after that. And I think that's particularly for corporate placements. But if you want to go to if you want to go abroad, get a master's, if you want to do your higher education there, then I think your CGPA all the way until the end of your fifth year does matter. Let's see. What about hostel rooms? Are they state of the art or meh? Well, hostel rooms are fine. Um, Obviously, they're nothing like a hotel, but I'd say that they're pretty decent. They're obviously habitable, much above habitable. I would say it's fairly comfortable. And there are different quality of hostels, like depending on which one you get, so you get a variety of experiences in that sense. But I'd say it's pretty good. Overall, nothing to worry about on that end. Yeah, sorry about that. I met some friends on the way and I was interrupted for a bit. But yeah, I'm going to continue answering the questions. Hostels are fine. I think they're pretty good. You won't find any issue. If you want to talk about the comparable quality of hostels, it's pretty much the same in every university. Like there'll be a couple universities with really good hostel rooms, but I think all are more or less okay. There's nothing, there's not too much of a big deal in hostel rooms, honestly. What about others at the campus? Are they friendly and approachable? Yeah, for sure. I definitely say that about NLS. I think the seniors, especially if you're new here, the seniors are especially welcoming. They're warm. They're ready to introduce you to sort of culture that we have here. So I think interacting with the others has been easy. They are quite friendly and approachable. So if you have an issue, you just text someone, you can just approach someone, talk to them about it. Everyone's quite open about it. What kind of committees you get to join? So there are a lot of committees. There's the legal service clinic, which is essentially a legal aid committee, and they do a bunch of work, mostly volunteering. They take clients directly, clients who are facing legal issues. We deal with their legal issues directly, advise them on the steps that they can take forward. So there's that. There's the academic support program, which essentially helps out with notes and any academic issues that the college has. There is event management committee, which manages events, organizes. I think the flagship event is Strawberry Fields, which is supposed to be a rock concert, but we didn't have it last year. So there's a lot of committees. I think like there's 16 of them if I go on to list them. But yeah, for pretty much every interest, there's a committee. There's a music club. There's an art club. So pretty much every collective you can join depending on what your interest is. How to cover GK backlog now? I'll get to that question. So I'm just sort of addressing on a lighter note, talking about campus a little bit. But yes, we will get to strategy, what's been on the last one, GK backlog, things like that. What is it there in the exams? I saw somewhere that the questions are similar to what we get in legal reasoning. Uh, the questions are not really similar to what you have in legal reasoning. Although it is similar to the extent that you get a hypothetical and then you have to apply legal principles to that. That's pretty much it. Obviously, it's not MCQ, but at least most legal papers have a pattern where they give you a hypothetical, and obviously you study the law throughout the entire course, and you apply that law to a hypothetical, and that test it rigorously tests the kind of understanding that you have of those principles of law and your ability to apply it in novel situations. So mostly, broadly, I would say that's the pattern of our exam questions. What about food? It's all right. There's a mess. I'm not gonna say it's anything great. Exact same comments as I had for the hostel. Some universities have exceptionally great mess food. Most of the others have okay. I think ours is fine. I don't mind going to it, but it's not like I would definitely want to go to it. Do you think choosing NALSA and preference will be good, or should I choose NLS? Well, university choices are a very personal question as well, especially when the college quality is cutting it quite close. So if you're asking NLS and NALSA, I would say they're comparable in almost every metric. Like there are a few metrics, maybe you could say that they're different. Like so for example, the number of professors we have, quality of professors, things like that. They are a bit different on a few metrics, but broadly, I would say they more or less give you this a similar career path if you want one. NLS, I would say, is focused more on academia though, and NALSA are not as much. Also, NALSA is pretty far away from the city. NLS is quite embedded in the city, so you can go anywhere you want, and it's very easy. And also depends on where you live, right? Where you hail from, where you're more comfortable going, and what kind of life you want to have. So that's an in-depth conversation to be had, depending on what your experiences are, your preferences are. Are we friends with each other from the same batch? Yeah, of course. I have a lot of friends who are juniors. I have a lot of friends who are seniors. In fact, Anish is one of my friends. That's how I came to know of NLTI. That's how I joined NLTI. And Anish is in a senior batch than I am. So yeah, there are a lot of students who are friends with across batches. What is my CLAT sectional score? Okay, that's another strategy-based question that I'll address. First one's GK backlog. Second one was what is my CLAT experience, and third one was what is my CLAT sectional score. So just remind me of this like when I start addressing CLAT-based questions, and I'll come to this. But for now, like there are a few more questions on campus, so I'll just take those. Law school has its own format. How do you get used to the environment? Anything you need to do before? Nothing you need to do before, really. Of course, law school has its own environment, as does every university. And you take time to adjust to an entirely new social life, entirely new structure of your entire day. And I think that's for the first semesters for the very least. You take that time to sort of digest what's in front of you, your experiences. You get acclimatized to it, and I think then it's routine. Then it's okay. So I think you take a little 3 months. Everyone has their own way of getting used to law school, but it's not that complicated. There's nothing you have to do to consciously prepare. Everyone gets used to it in a couple of months. Shivani told you that there were a lot of foreign stuffs in food. So yeah, there were a few issues with the food. We found something like iron boards or insects in the food. That did happen before, but I think, at least to my knowledge, it was a one-off instance. It doesn't happen every other day, and a huge hue and cry was made of that instance. And I think they rectified it because the hygiene since then has been much better. But like I said, it's okay. The food is not bad. The food is not great. If you live in a hostel, you want to eat food. I think you can just go to the mess and eat food. Not like it's completely unpalatable or anything. It's decent. It's all right. But yeah, okay. I think I've addressed all like sort of campus-based questions. I can now move on to a little. And if you have anything, also you can just drop it in the chat. But I'll now move on to a few more questions. A few questions based on CLAT or based on strategy, based on what you can do in the coming few weeks. All right. So first off, yeah, can everyone just check their mics, make sure that they're muted throughout the session. Thank you. So first question that I recall, sorry, that's a dog barking in the distance in case you didn't hear it. Campus has a lot of dogs, so that's there too. First question was, how was my CLAT experience? What did I do? How did I approach the paper? So I had been preparing at the point for about 1.5 years. Uh, I was seriously prepared for about 9 months, and that's I think that I think happened after CLAT 2022. Sorry, CLAT 2021. So I was taking CLAT 2022, and I had 9 months after CLAT 2022. After CLAT 2021 happened, so that's when I began like really seriously preparing. And my routine was quite simple actually. What I did is, and I made the strategic decision to homeschool when I was in uh, when I was in 12th, and I think that 11th and 12th. So I think no 11th I did go to college, but 12th I homeschooled. So I think that really paid off because I had more than enough time on my hands to dedicate to CLAT. That's how my strategy went. I think in the mornings what I used to do was get my GK out of the way. So for I think for most of those 9 months in which I was preparing very rigorously, very seriously, most of those 9 months, my mornings would start out with GK. So I had like five set sources from which I would read my GK. So in the morning, I'd get up and I just read the GK. I just go through it. I didn't have to like necessarily intentionally memorize what I was doing, but my idea was just to go through the GK. That was about 2 hours of 2 hours in the morning, I'd say. Five sources, not too difficult, but that was of the daily GK. And right after I finished reading it, I take a small break, and then I'd get to updating. So I was in a study group, and this study group had four people. So we divided the number of sources that we would update on our notes, right? So we said, okay, you update one source, I'll update one source. So I had two sources to update, and I'd already finished reading from those two sources. So now my only job was to extract the important information from what I just read and note it down. So I did that for about another 1.5 hours, and after that maybe I take a small break. I'm done with my GK for the day basically, and now I take a mock, and this is around 2 p.m. because 2 p.m. is usually when the CLAT uh, conducts the test as well. So I sort of wanted to harmonize that, simulate testing conditions as much as possible. So I took a mock at 2 p.m. That was and after I took the mock again, obviously a small break from the mental exhaustion of taking a paper for 2 hours. Maybe I'd do a few sectional tests if I could, but I think at one point I'd exhausted all sectional tests. I finished pretty much everything there was, and I was solid in my foundation. So I stopped doing sectional tests like I'd say 6 months towards the end. I don't think that's the case for everyone, or everyone should follow that strategy. But like I said, I was preparing for 1.5 years. So for me, it was okay to not do sectional tests because the past 1 year I had already exhausted all sectional tests there was. I'd done all sectional tests. I was clear with all concepts. So at some point, I stopped doing sectional tests. And after I did my mocks, I had my study group, and we would get on a Google Meet. We would just discuss the GK. we would discuss the GK of the day. We would quiz each other, take each other up on our preparation. And one thing that we almost always did, which I think was quite beneficial for our prep, is that we analyzed the mock together. So we probably took a mock the day or the day before that, and we had individually analyzed it. Well. We just individually went through the questions that we got wrong, and later on, what we decided to do was analyze it as a group. So I tell my friend, hey, I think this question seems a little off. I wasn't very convinced by this answer, and they would respond with, this is an explanation that I could come up with the answer. And then we debate a little, we go back and forth. So that's what our group mock analysis mostly consisted of. I did that with them like for about 1.5 to 2 hours, and then obviously you're with friends. There's a little banter. There's a little fun. So it's a good way of ending the day as well. This is around 7 p.m. or so that we finish our meeting. And after that, I think I just have the day to myself for a bit because I've done a lot during the day, obviously. I've got my GK out the way. I was clear with my basics. I was good with my quants. I did have to take up quants a little bit later, I think, because I was getting weak at it. So I thought, what, I'll just practice a few more sectionals. That's what I did. And I think that helped with my quants. So sometimes I would take up quant sectionals. But this is broadly how my day went. This is my usual day for about a year just before CLAT happened. What I'd ideally do. Also, you can say hi. I think this he's named Ace, if I remember correctly. I do not know the other dog's name, but yeah, back to back to what I was addressing. What did I do on the day of the paper? So I think a few things to keep in mind that everyone should. There's another question on quants, which I'll come and address. But coming back to what I was addressing, what will I do? What did I do on the day of the paper? A few things you want to keep in mind is your energy levels, right? Those are quite important. You're going to take the most important test of your life. So you want to make sure you have like good energy levels. You want to make sure you're not exhausted. You want to make sure you don't blank out. So for that, uh, taking care of your body, basic minimum. That means trying to get some good sleep. Try to get 8 hours if you can. I tried, but I was so anxious I couldn't get 8 hours, which is fine. It's quite normal. Try to get some good sleep. Get up in the morning. Don't overload on sugar. Just have a normal breakfast, and just a little bit before the exam, I had an energy bar or something. So these are just to check all the boxes to make sure my physical condition is all right before I take the mock. And obviously, I didn't do any mock, any sectional, any GK, any revision on that day. I completely left everything aside. I didn't want to do any of that because it's the final day and I don't want to burden myself with all that. My focus is more on my headspace at that moment. So I kept all that aside. And my center was about half an hour away from where I live. So that wasn't too much of a problem. I went to my center in the car. We got down, and there were a lot of other students. I met some of my friends there as well, who I was preparing with. So I just sat down. We were chatting. We were having a conversation, and we were allowed to enter our exam halls half an hour before the paper. So I had a good solid half an hour before the paper was handed to me, but I was just in the exam hall present with, I think there were about 20, 25 students in the exam hall, and all was just waiting for the question paper to come. So I think that's one place where you can at least control your thoughts, control your anxiety, because a lot of students tell me that they have this crippling failure of of not being able to do well in the test. They have this fear of that failure, and often I think that fear acts against you, even if you have great preparation. So I think it's in this small time space that you just want to calm yourself and tell yourself, what I've done this far is enough. I've worked hard and I deserve to get what I want. And even if that doesn't materialize in the end, I think if you walk in with that mindset, you have a higher chance that it actually does materialize. That's the mindset with which I approach the paper. So half an hour before my paper is given, I didn't I just didn't overthink it. I said, you know what, I have good preparation. I've worked really hard for this, and I shouldn't be that worried. So I just took a small nap before they gave me the paper, and I got the paper, and I straight away got to solving the questions. I didn't really flip through the paper to gauge its difficulty or something. And I suggest no one does that as well. Just solve the paper as it comes. That's what I believe. So I started with my conventional order. I usually solve the paper in the exact order that is given. That's English, GK, legal, logical, and quants. And that's the order in which I proceeded. I faced a little issues in legal. So while I did end up getting a good score in legal in the end, and I'll come to the sectional breakup, my issue was that I was running out of time because I ended up taking too much time for legal. Legal was an easy section that year, but it was also quite lengthy. So for a section that I was supposed to take around 35 to 40 minutes, at least that's what I committed to myself out of 150 minutes, I ended up taking about 45 to 50 minutes. And that's a lot of time to take for one section. So now I had two sections left. I had logic and quants, and I had to finish it all in a very, I think it was about 35, 30 minutes. I had to finish both these sections. So I was quite concerned. And what I did is I raced through the logical section. And that came at the cost of my accuracy, which I think is all right. I got a relatively lower score in logic, but I think I compensated for that by doing well in legal and doing well in the other sections. I had this idea that I want to leave a minimum of 17 minutes for quants. At least I found that that was the sweet spot for me where I could attempt every single question. And so I said, okay, if I have 30 minutes right now, I want to leave 17 minutes for quants. That means I have to finish logical in 13 minutes. And so I did that. I attempted everything in logical. There were about 30 questions. I attempted all of those in a span of 13 minutes. I practically raced through logic, I think. I read the passages quite quickly. I didn't ponder upon the questions too much at all. I just marked what my first intuition was, and that's how logic went. So I got a relatively lower score in logic, but I don't regret it because I attempted everything, and I think that in itself was quite valuable because I that gave me a higher score than I otherwise would have had uh, if I hadn't attempted everything. So that's for one for sure. And at the end, I finished the paper with no time to spare. I think, yeah, I didn't have any time to spare once I finished the paper. There's one quant question that I just couldn't get my finger on, couldn't get my thumb on. I tried as much as possible, but I couldn't get it, so I just like left that one question. Later, I found out that it's just in the heat of the moment that I couldn't get that question. Otherwise, it was quite an easy one, and that's how the end of my paper went. My total score was 111.25 out of 150, and my sectional breakup, if I remember correctly, was as follows. So in English, I had 23.25. In GK, I had 23.5. Yeah. In legal, I had 35 on 40. In logic, I had 16.25 on 30. In quants, I had, I think, 13.75 on 50. I think these are the rough scores. But broadly, I did well in all the sections except logic, which I think is fine. It's sort of balanced out, and I got a good rank in the end anyway, which is the overall goal. It doesn't matter if you don't do well in that many that many questions. GK was 23.5 out of 35. So again, and now I'll take a few other questions and to address one of the questions in the chat. Yes, I am an Arthur Villa scholar. I did get the Arthur Villa scholarship later on in college. On cons, how necessary is it to take a bit of the off-track topics? So it depends on your sample papers. Firstly, at least the trend that I've seen, your sample papers are not necessarily indicative of what comes in the final exam, but I would still do whatever comes in the sample papers to be on the safer side to cover those kinds of topics. The idea is to have a basic graph on all topics. So, say for example, you have permutation, combination, you have time, speed, distance. Now, historically, these haven't really made major appearances in CLAT at all. But at the same time, you don't want to risk it. So, I tell all my students have a good grasp over the basics. You know, like something like ratio, something like percentage. These are very basic concepts that are definitely going to come. So you want to pick up some caselets and solve topics related to these. But aside from that, in case there are topics that catch you off guard, like permutation, combination, or things like that, you want to be ready. So at the very least, just know the basic concepts. I'm not saying master them. I'm not saying do 1,000 caselets on them, but at the very least, know those basic concepts so you can get by if such a question ever does appear in the exam. But also recall that if it's difficult for you, it's difficult for everyone. So if you have at the very least a basic grasp of these concepts, a lot of people might not have even touched those concepts. So at least you have an edge there. And the idea in a competitive examination, obviously, is not to get 150 on 150, it's to get more than the others. So you don't have to worry if aren't able to answer every single question. The idea is at least have a broad grasp of the basics in every quant section, but master those few concepts which recurrently appear in the past year papers. So that's for that question. When did I give my last mock and how many days before the paper? I gave my last mock 2 days before the paper, but like this is a very personal thing. I just wanted to give my last mock 2 days before the paper to maintain that flow. For me, it was if I let go of CLAT if I let go of mocks for too long, then I'm not going to be in that. I don't know how to express this except to say that I'm not going to be in that mindset, in that zone of being able to do papers easily, which I wanted to be. So I said I'm going to take a mock day before the exam, not the exact day before. As in, uh, I took a mock 2 days before the exam, and that's how I did it. But I know a lot of friends who took one 3 days, took one week, or didn't take any mocks for the last month at all, and still did well. So there's no sort of like straight jacket formula. This is just the approach that I like to follow. Total number of mocks that I gave roughly 140 mocks. I know that's a lot because I had been preparing for a long time, about 1.5 years. That's the number of mocks that I gave. But again, my experience is not uh, my experience is not everyone's experience. Everyone has different experiences. Some of the people here in NLS had taken like one mock or two mocks just before they took the CLAT, and they still made it here. So again, the experiences vary a lot. This is my experience. So how my scores in mocks, especially GK, did I score the same marks in GK as I did in mocks? Um, in GK, in my mocks, I scored higher. I think. I usually about out of 35 questions, I got around 27 to 30 questions right. So that's how my GK went. As to how I was doing in mocks, it varied a lot. Depend on if it's a CL mock or an LE mock. But I think my final score was more or less the average of how I was doing in mocks in the end. But that doesn't mean that whatever score you're getting in mocks is the score you get in the final exam. I know a lot of friends here in college who had never crossed 100 in their mocks, but on the day of the final exam, they gave their mocks and they were far beyond 100 and they made it here. So that experience is not it just because you have a certain mock score. You can't say that, all right, this is definitely the kind of score that I'm going to get in the final exam. It all varies depending on how your day goes, how difficult the paper is. Which order do you recommend we attempt sections in? So this is again a very personal question that you have to experiment with. I cannot recommend a uniform method. For me, English, GK, legal, logic, and quants work. But I can't say it'll work for everyone. Firstly, I really like to keep quants last because you might mess up in quants if you take it in between, and that's going to take up a lot of your time. Whereas you can't mess up in logic, for example. In logic, you can be confused between two options, but it's not like you're going to be completely roadblocked. So that's with regards to quants. So generally, I recommend keeping quants at the very end, and I recommend using GK as a break. So if you find that some sections are very strenuous, you can't attempt them all in a go, you just keep GK in between. GK acts as a sort of like 5 to 7 minute break because you're not really using your mind, you're not reading the passages. It's mostly just a recalling exercise. So you can use GK as a break and then you can arrange and shuffle your sections accordingly. But this is the order that I like to do it in. And these are the two ground rules that I usually recommend everyone follows. Did I land in the toppers list during my mocks? What were my average scores in mocks? Um, I did, I think, but not always. And the reason for that is I say this to everyone now as well who's so worried and anxious about how their mock scores are, is these are not final determinants of how you will do because there are a lot of students who manipulate the final score list. and that can be quite misleading. It can destroy your confidence. So I don't suggest looking to that as the sort of gospel of how you're going to do in the final exam. But yeah, I did occasionally appear in the toppers list. My average scores really depended. If it's an LE mock, you can expect your average score to be around 80, 85, 88. So CL mock, you can expect it to be higher. So some CL mocks are very, very easy. So you could even expect, everyone could expect a score of 120. But most CL mocks would be around 100, 105-ish. And this is a score out of 150. Just remember that. You have a paper of 120, so it's a different experience for you guys. How did you manage pressure on the D-Day? What's my class score? What's my sequence? So I already said my class score, my sequence. I hope you caught that. If not, then just like drop that question again. How did I manage pressure on that day? So I think I had always been preparing for that day. So I didn't really do anything specific on that day to address pressure. I didn't do anything extra. I acted like it was just another day. And I generally recommend that everyone follows that. I don't think you have to go out of your way to do some meditation or some like soothing, calming exercise that you find on the internet. Honestly, I don't think, at least personally speaking, and based on my knowledge, I don't think that's going to be of much help. What you'll instead do is you'll build up the experience so much in your head that when the time comes for you to give your paper, you'll freeze because you've built this up so much in your head. You've treated it like it's the end of the world, and I think people ought not to do that. Treat it like you're taking another mock, right? That's one of the that's one piece of advice that I'd received from a senior. It just treat it like this is one more mock, one final mock that you have to give, and approach it with that mindset. But to address pressure, I had always been contemplating about that final day, and I did this throughout my prep as well. I thought about how I would sit down, what kind of OMR I would use, what kind of pen I would use for my OMR, how would it be if I got a good score, how would it be if I got a bad score. So these are things that crossed my mind a lot. Even when I took mocks, I sort of imagined myself sitting in that exam hall. And I think because I had already pictured myself doing these things over and over and over again, that day seemed like I already sort of made that day up in my head. I already knew how it was coming. So not much of it was a surprise to me, particularly the atmosphere and the pressure, because I'd expected this. I knew that I would feel this. You can't walk into the exam expecting yourself not to feel any anxiety and pressure because you most definitely will. Question is how okay are you with that? And if you want to be able to be okay with that, treat it like it's another mock. At least that's the advice that I would give if you want to take the paper like that. Do I start with RC with a very high speed? How much time do I take for it? How do I prepare for GK? So for GK, GK is a very complex thing for me to explain right now. It'll take me like a whole 1 hour if I sit down and explain GK. But if you are curious about my GK strategy, I have a couple of videos on YouTube. Some of them with my study buddies on how I did GK. Very extensive videos covering my entire strategy and my sources, things like that. So you can just look that up. As for as for RC, yes, I did start RC. And I'm not sure what you mean by a very high speed. I did RC like I did every other section. I didn't like employ a different strategy for RC or anything. I just read it like I would normally read a passage, and it took me about for 30 questions. For you, it's not 30 questions. For me, it was 30 questions. For 30 questions, it took me about I would say 22, somewhere around 22 to 25 minutes, somewhere in that range. What is the library timing in NLS? I think the library opens in the morning at 10 a.m. and it closes at 12 a.m. Let's see more questions. How do I manage to stay motivated and consistent in the last minute, keeping in mind the pressure and anxiety? Well, I think motivation should not be an issue for most aspirants at this point. Because for me, I knew the stakes involved, and the stakes are the next 5 years of your life. The stakes are 5 years of your legal education. The stakes are potentially your career altogether, because depending on what college you go to, your career can look quite different. So I think the stakes are quite obvious and the stakes are quite high. And if that's not enough to motivate someone, well, then, you know, what can I say? But we take the exam because that's the end goal, right? And with that, I think with that end goal in mind, that just kept me motivated. I did a lot of things. Like, I remember I used to Google NLS a lot. I had a picture of it as my wallpaper, background, everything. So I had this single-minded vision that, you know what, this is a college that I want to get into, and I want to do as much as possible to make sure that I make it. I want to do as much as possible to make sure that uh, nothing, it's in my ability, and nothing outside my control can affect whether or not I finally get in that college. And that's what kept me motivated. That's why I worked as hard as I did. As for pressure and anxiety, like I said, you can't expect yourself not to have it. Question is, how well equipped are you to bear it on that day? So that's why I said it's sort of like a mind palace where I constructed an image of me taking the exam on the final day. I simulated my environments. I pictured myself doing that, such that the final day wasn't a surprise to me. It was like taking another mock, because it's exactly what I'd expected. It's exactly the kind of anxiety and pressure that I'd expected. But I walked in there trusting my preparation, knowing that I had done enough, and all I had to do was just execute. That's the attitude with which I walked. I think that's why I was consistent and I was able to deal with the pressure. Was I confident with my GK prep? Yes, I most definitely was. GK was a section that I put, I think, all my effort in. 1 year of my prep was devoted primarily to GKs. GK took like, I think, 4 to 5 hours of my day. So I was very thorough with GK. I covered a lot, so I was quite confident with it. Yes, there are a lot of questions here, so I'll just take them one by one. Did I attempt ALET as well? If so, what was my performance there? Yes, I attempted ALET. I attempted ALET a little bit after CLAT. I got All India rank 2 in ALET. I'm unable to increase my attempts. I'm still stuck in only 80. How can I increase my attempts? Did I also have the same problem? So, attempts was not an issue for me for a huge part of my preparation, because, like I said, I had been preparing for a year and a half. And that means I was reading a lot already. And I was geared to be able to attempt the paper faster. So usually when I was taking mocks quite seriously towards the end, I would try and attempt at least 140 out of 150. For me, I was trying to maximize my attempts as much as possible. So attempts were not much of an issue for me. And there's another question where someone's struggling with attempts as well. So I'll address that. Attempts, when you're struggling with attempts, it mostly arises from reading speed. You're not quite familiar with reading. Uh, you're not there at that stage of verbal comprehension. So reading can be quite slow. You're sort of pulling yourself. You're wading through the reading, and I know that can be an issue. And there's another question on reading speed and regaining reading speed. So I'll address that, and I'll address maximizing your attempts as well. Now, the issue on reading speed is, unfortunately, the answer is not all that sweet and simple, because the difficult answer is, and the only answer is, that it takes time. You get better at reading and reading faster when you've been reading extensively for longer periods of time, right? But this does not mean you can improve your reading speed. You cannot improve your reading speed drastically now, because I'll give you a couple tips that you can use to increase your speed in the exam. But as for just pure reading speed, that's a little harder to pump up instantly. because it requires you to have a lot of experience in reading, and only then does your mind get used to reading much faster. So someone who's been reading very consistently for over a year will find that their reading speed is increased quite drastically. But aside from that, there are still some good tips that you can utilize to maximize your attempts and to increase your reading speed, right? To increase your reading speed, I would say the first thing you can do is just YouTube it, Google it, right? A very basic solution that I'm sure a lot of you must have thought of before, but I encourage you to do it because there are a few very universal and agreed upon principles and tricks that you can use to increase your reading speed. One of them is eliminating subvocalization, which means eliminating this sort of like little voice in your head that runs when you're reading a passage. And if you eliminate subvocalization, and how do you do that? I encourage you to Google it. I don't want to go into it too extensively here because there are other questions to answer as well. But eliminating subvocalization, using your finger or a pencil as a pointer, all of these are strategies you can use to increase your reading speed drastically, almost immediately. So those are some tips that you can definitely look at online. And these are some of the examples that I just gave you. They're very easy to find. As for how do you maximize your attempts at this stage now, I would say, and here's my approach to a passage. And this is something that I've done in my, I'm a mentor at NLTI. So this is something that I do in my weekly doubt clearing sessions. Whenever we're having doubt clearing sessions, we sit down and we discuss questions, we solve questions. And so I show them how I approach a passage, and I'll tell you how I approach a passage and how why I think it's much faster, much more efficient. So my first reading of the passage is going to be a very bare bones reading. I'm not going to sit down. I'm not going to remember the details. I'm not going to remember the proper nouns. I'm not even going to engage with the ideas in much depth for my first reading of the passage, right? My first reading of the passage is going to be sort of bare bones. And that won't take a lot of time because of the manner in which I'm reading. I'm reading it quite quickly so as to not pay attention to every idea in detail. But what I'm doing in my first reading is I'm getting a basic idea of the structure of the passage. I'm getting an idea of which point is present where, right? Number one. And number two, I'm getting an idea of the basic essence of the passage. What is the passage trying to address? What is the passage trying to tell me? So these are just the two things I am focusing on while during my first reading of the passage, which is quite fast, right? It usually for like a 400 word passage, not going to take more than 45 seconds to 1 minute. And once I get to the question, this is where I allow myself time. I read a question and I say, okay, which part of the passage is relevant to this question? And because I know from my first reading which point is where, I'll just go back to that part in the passage and I'll read that part a little bit closer because it's relevant for my question. And then I'll come back and I'll answer the question. So I give myself time to go back to the passage rather than sticking down and reading the passage slowly one by one in the beginning. Because this strategy allows you to focus only on the parts of the passage that are important for you. And the parts of the passage that are important for you are those that come the questions, right? So this reading approach is faster and it's much more efficient as well. That's the approach that I have for reading. And I've already given you some tips on reading speed. So I think you can combine these approaches and see if that increases your reading speed. You can definitely improve your attempts doing these. And one more thing I would say for GK especially is don't be afraid to take intelligent guesses. By that I mean, if you don't know a question, strictly speaking, if you don't recall what the answer is, it doesn't mean leave it altogether, right? Uh, what I would say is if you have a vague idea, or if you can at least use some crude logic to eliminate one option or two options, just go for it because the statistics are in your favor. If you even blindly mark uh, four different questions, there's a statistical probability that you get one of them right. And if you get one of them right, that offsets the negative effect of the other three, which means you end up with a total positive of plus 0.25. So technically, if you blindly mark four questions, you'll end up with a plus 0.25. This is to tell you that you should ideally take this. That's the idea that I'm bringing here. That doesn't mean blindly mark a question if you don't know it. It's just to say that if you can crudely eliminate one or two, just confidently mark one using some sort of intelligent guessing or some logic if you can come up with. And I think increasing GK attempts is like a great way to increase your overall attempts as well. That's one more thing I'm going to uh, point out with regards to GK. How do I overcome after I spend so much time in legal and still attempt to do the logical and quads? Did I not panic? So I definitely did panic a little, of course, but I knew that that's not the end all and be all because I was going to do well in the other sections, right? I had that much faith. One section bad does not equal all sections bad. I ran through logic to compensate for how much time I took in legal. And I knew that even if I didn't get a great score in logic, it would turn out fine because I was confident with the way my GK went, with the way my RC went, with the way my quants went. So it was, like I said, you have to predict these kinds of situations. You can't predict it all going like very ideal and flowery. Everyone has, and everyone who's made it endless also has a lot of crazy stories about how their final flat went in. Like they missed their OMR or something like that. They thought they messed up the whole paper. So you have to be ready for emergencies like that. I was ready to deal with it. So I didn't, although I did panic, I just took about 10, 20 seconds to myself. I collected myself and said, okay, you know what? This is what I'm going to do now going forward, even though I've already spent so much time on it. Of address reading speed, this, how should you revise current affairs in the last month? Ideally through compendiums if you don't have your own notes. I think that's the best solution that I have because I had my own notes. Like I said, I'd been preparing for about 9 to 10 months. I'd taken extensive notes throughout my prep, so I revised mostly from my notes. But ideally, you want to look at a set of compendiums. As for what compendiums, I refer to the Manthan compendiums. NLTI also has its compendiums. You can refer to those. I've heard that Drishti is good, but I don't know because I haven't personally done Drishti. But I did do a bunch of Manthan compendiums. Quants, where did I prepare from? So quants I primarily did using my the sectional tests that my coaching centers had given. So they had a bunch of books and they had a bunch of sectional tests online. So I exhausted all of those because they had good case lists. Once I was done with that, I just go online and look for it. It's really not hard. You just have to search like data interpretation questions or case-led questions, and you'll find a lot of resources that give you these questions. It's not difficult to grab hold of those. But you can do it from any source as long as it gives you, as long as it challenges you and it gives you, and its pattern is somewhat similar to CLAT. So you don't have to restrict yourself to any particular source. Did I go back to the passage in CR? I did, yeah. For every single reading section, I went back to the passage. It's not like I read the passage once and answered all 5 questions and boom, I'm done. How is it that the people who top CLAT are always the ones that top ALET too? Well, obviously because they have overlapping skills. These examinations are both law examinations, so they're testing you on similar analytical skills. So if you've developed good enough analytical skills for one particular section, then for one particular exam, then there's a high chance that you're going to have similarly developed analytical skills for another exam. So even though I didn't prepare very much for ALET, I had prepared for CLAT, and those skills are sort of transferable. So that's why most people who top CLAT top ALET as well. I just can't remember so much GK. How do I cover so much? Should I just do the main topics or just the NLTI KZ? What should I do now? Uh, so ideally, at this stage, you want to just focus on compendiums. There's no shortcut list of main topics, by the way. If there are coaching centers out there who are giving you a list of topics, and sure, those are good markers of what is important and what is not, but do not stick to those as your only source of preparation. Do not pick out some main topics because remember that these coaching centers also have no authority over what's going to come in the final paper. They play absolutely no role in what's going to come in the final paper. And if history is anything to go by, then whatever main topics these guys prescribe never end up coming in the paper. Like 1 out of 6 will come or something. So don't use these main topics as your only source of preparation. The idea is to get your idea is to get as comprehensive coverage as you possibly can. And in order for you Can someone just mute? Okay, it's all right. I got it. The idea is to get as comprehensive a coverage as you possibly can. And that doesn't mean restricting yourself to these main topic things. It means consulting a variety of compendiums which are as exhaustive as possible. And if you haven't done a lot of your backlog, you have only 1 month left. So you have to run through these compendiums. You have to read them as much as possible. You don't have to sit down and soak in all the information, right? This is an important distinction that I have to explain. CLAT does not require you to actively recall every single piece of GK because you have four options in front of you, and it's just enough for you to remember which one of these four uh, to collect one of these four from your memory. That is not the same as actively recalling a piece of information and saying it out loud on your own, as opposed to just like it ringing a bell when you see one out of four options. So it's all right if you can't remember the information instantly, as long as you can just identify it out of four options, right? And that's why you don't have to sit down and bother yourself over reading GK about memorizing every single tidbit of GK. What you have to bother yourself over more is just making sure you cover it. And that's to say you read as much as possible. But that doesn't mean you obviously just skim through it and you have no idea what was said. You obviously read with focus. So that's for GK and memory. You're having an issue with GK and quants. Is it possible to catch up in the last month? Yes, for sure, it's possible to catch up in the last month. Like I said, GK is primarily compendium based. Although GK is a much harder thing to catch up in 1 month than the other sections. Quants, on the other hand, is much easier to catch up. Just take up a bunch of caselets, just take up a bunch of sectional tests, and do about like three, four of them every day. And within 2 to 3 weeks, you will see like a drastic improvement in your quants. So quants is fairly simple, straightforward to catch up on. Make sure you time yourself while you're doing them. So give yourself like 15 minutes for 15 questions or something along those lines. And quants is easy to catch up on. GK, you have to consult. I would say do two or three compendiums and try to cover as much as possible. I don't know how extensive your backlog is, but the more extensive it is, the tougher it's going to be. How important is remembering numbers for GK? LE and CL mocks, exact funds allocated to government schemes, so you should be invest time in remembering them. Now, to be on the safer side, I did invest a lot of time in sitting down remembering these numbers, but honestly speaking, not a lot of these have actually made it to the final paper. Very few questions have these number-based questions, and I find that it's counterproductive to sit down and spend a lot of your time on memorizing these numbers because they don't form a bulk of the questions that eventually appear in the CLAT anyway. So what I do recommend is diverting your time to more important things like quants and just doing GK generally rather than memorizing these minute numbers. And if such a question does come in the final paper, chances are most people won't know it. And even if they do know it, it's just going to be one or two questions. I think your time is better invested elsewhere. I did memorize them, but that's because I had prepared for GK much in advance and I had a lot of time for it. I was prepared for it, but you guys might not because you have one. Which compendium I was using, I already said. Where do I prepare QT from? I already said. Where do I do tones from? Uh, Tones, no, that's a little difficult. I do have a list of tones that I'd sent to my mentorship group that I had formulated back. Okay, no, that's not tones. Those are literary devices. Tones, I think it's difficult to find a consolidated set of notes for tones or anything. You just have to learn from experience in the sense that every time you get a tone question wrong, you sort of go and Google what does this actually mean, and then you see examples of this sort of tone, and you hone that over and over and over again. And it's usually from experience and getting questions wrong in mocks. That's how I learned my tones. But alternatively, if you're trying to find a way to catch up on them quickly, I'm sure there are some Google resources. Just go and Google like tones in competitive examinations, things like that. And you will find a bunch of sources that explain all the different types of tones. There aren't all too many as well, like there's analytical, explanatory, critical, persuasive, all that, argumentative. So it shouldn't take you too much time. I think there's a maximum of like 20, 25 you should know. so it won't take you that much time. So you can go online, just Google that, consult those sources, and I think you'll be fine. Can I take a special session for GK? I will see Sahil, but that's quite a difficult thing for me to do at this stage because of my commitments. My trimester just started, and I have a lot of other academic commitments. And I have my usual mentorship group as well, where I give about 1.5 hours. So maybe you can put in a word to Anish, and you can text Anish personally and say that you want this. Depending on that, I will take another session on any topic that you guys want me to address. But if you want me to address any topic, I suggest sending a message to Anish. Yeah, I'm a dropper and I have a bad experience last time giving CLAT and I panic. How should I prepare myself? Um, I think I addressed this a little before, but again, I just recap it a little bit more. I prepared myself for that day mentally by picturing as if I was in the exam hall every time I took the mock. So the final day was not that much of a shock to me because I sort of expected all of it. I calculated all the tiny things that would run up to the exam, like walking up the stairs, talking to the other students, sitting in an exam hall filled with 100 other people, opening my pen, opening the course booklet, all these small things that sort of chalked out in my head. So when the final day came, it was not all that unexpected, and I was ready for it. Well, I still felt pressure. I still felt anxiety. Um, I think I convinced myself. I told myself that my preparation is enough. I don't think I have to feel this much anxiety because I'm confident in the amount of work that I've done. And I think those two things mainly help soothe my pressure, my anxiety if I had. Yeah, 100%. I did a lot of GK, but what finally appeared wasn't what I expected. This is definitely the case for every person, every topper who does well in GK also. Whatever things you think are important now are probably not going to come flat, but that's okay. A rule of thumb is if you've done as much comprehensive coverage as possible, you will get better scores than the others, right? And it's not necessary that whatever you prepared exactly squarely is going to come in the paper. It could be a little tangential. It could require you to do a lot of guessing. But as a rule of thumb, whoever prepares more will get more in GK. And it's very simple. It's very straightforward. That's how it's generally been. You can't expect to get the exact things that you expected in GK as well. In GK particularly, in CLAT generally, but in GK particularly, expect the unexpected. Should we take notes for GK backlog or try to read and absorb as much as possible? And when you have 1 month left, try to read and absorb as much as possible. There's not much point sitting down and taking notes now. How many mocks did I give in the last month? I gave about 3 to 4 mocks a week. So in the last month, I think my CLAT was on 19th, right? So I gave about, I think, 4 to 5 mocks in that month. Not too many. My focus was more on just like taking it easy. My last month, I was just watching a lot of videos, YouTube videos, actually. How often would I revise for GK? A lot of time a topic comes up, but you don't remember it. You forget the exact numbers, stats, and figures. Now, it's okay if you forget the exact stats numbers. Like I said, you don't have to actively recall something. It just has to ring a bell when you see 4 options. But I personally went through my notes twice, I think, and I didn't even complete my second revision very well. But my goal was just to read everything twice, to go over it, so I'd have like a vague memory of it. And when I saw it in the final exam, it would ring a bell and I could mark that option. Do I have any ALET specific tips? Yes, I do. ALET is different from CLAT in one important respect, namely that you have analytical reasoning. Analytical reasoning refers to those puzzle questions. You have syllogisms, Venn diagrams, blood relations, coding questions. These sort of things you absolutely do not have in CLAT. So ALET is different in that respect, and it does require a little bit of a different prep. But I'd prepare for those concepts quite in depth, quite specifically. I'd spent a lot of time on those beforehand, so my conceptual foundation there was pretty solid, which is why I think I ended up doing well there eventually as well. So that's what I would say for ALET. I think I have 1 or 2 sessions on ALET. If you can just go on YouTube and if you can look it up, I've taken, I think, one or two sessions on ALET and analytical reasoning. So you can check that out for any ALET specific tips. Otherwise, everything else is the same. Firstly, I think aside from analytical reasoning, everything in ALET is the same as what you prepare for in class. For GK, how many weeks before the CLAT can we stop? December 3 is CLAT this time, so till which date is GK important? I would safely say you can stop your GK around like 15th of this month. Although like even that is quite late. That is quite late actually. Like by 15th, they're probably done printing the papers and they're just like finalizing whatever they've already done. So you can stop by around the 15th of this month. Although just keep your eye out for any really major developments, major events. Because I remember in CLAT 2021, for example, some of the questions were different based on an event that took place around 18 days ago, like 18 to 20 days ago. And this was different for some questions. So just be prepared for any really major events that take place. But I don't think you have to do uh, GK in that much detail for these this month at least. You can I think you can safely stop around December 15th. But yeah, guys, I think there are a lot of questions that are still flooding now, and I'm really glad that you guys have so many questions and you have so much enthusiasm for this. But I will have to end the session now. I do have classes to go for tomorrow. I have a bunch of commitments that I need to get to. I do not have enough time, unfortunately. It's quite dark, so I couldn't really show you the campus very well. So maybe another day if it's possible. But if you do want another session like this, or if you just want a specific session from me on any one of these issues, you can just text Anish, right? You can text on the groups that you're in. You can say that this is what you felt about the session, this is what you want from another session, or you can text Anish personally, right? Both ways work. Also today, I'm really sorry for the rest of the questions. I just won't be able to address them. I hope I have an opportunity in the future to take it up, right? But I will have to close the session for today. Thank you guys a lot for coming and thank you guys a lot for engaging with so much depth, so much enthusiasm. I'll see you guys next time.